Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. We have a new Tottenham Hotspur head coach. It is as expected, Thomas Frank. Announced late last night. I was on the way to play football. It was very awkwardly timed, but it's fine. Don't have to arrange it around me. I do wonder whether it was announced late last night just to prevent it being done on Friday the 13th. I don't know whether football clubs are particularly superstitious. I think players can be. I don't know if managers are. But it was done and announced late last night. I think 8:15, maybe just after. He's been handed a 3-year contract, the Dane, which is more than Conte, who I think got 2 with an option for a third. It's the same as Nuno. Similar-ish to Ange, who got 3 years plus an option for a fourth as well, I think it was. So, it's that kind of middle ground. I've seen some people saying it's too short. I think it's kind of roughly middle ground for Spurs managers. They've had a couple of longer term ones. Trying to remember what Mourinho was now. Mourinho, I feel like he was maybe a 4-year deal. I think Poch's last one, maybe Poch's initial one was 4 or 5 years, maybe. But ultimately, there may be an option in there as well. Who knows? Who knows? This is Tottenham. They like to either announce things with options included and you don't realise till you get nearer the time, or they don't announce or include any option which exists secretly behind a closed door. The statement itself, very much to the point, not a long flowing affair, just very much got down to business. We are delighted to announce the appointment of Thomas Frank as our new head coach on a contract that runs until 2028. Thomas has extensive experience in English football, having joined Brentford in 2016, since becoming one of the longest serving current managers in the Premier League. Yeah, it's weird that, isn't it? He's now gone like, whoop, straight down. Still one of the longest serving in the Premier League, but longest serving at a single club. He's now the least amount of time spent at a club. Funny the way it works. Guardiola, isn't it, who's up the top there. I feel like Arteta's maybe second now. I can't remember. But the rest is a little statement. During his time at Brentford, he transformed the club, moving them up from the Championship to an established Premier League side, consistently and significantly outperforming expectations for an extended period of time. In Thomas, we are appointing one of the most progressive and innovative head coaches within the game. He has a proven track record in player and squad development, and we look forward to him leading the team as we prepare for the season ahead. Thomas will be joined from Brentford by Justin Cochrane, first-team assistant coach, Chris Haslam, head of performance and first-team assistant coach, and Joe Newton, first-team coach analyst. First-team coach analyst, yeah, that's an interesting one there. With Andreas Georgeson, first-team assistant coach, arriving from Manchester United. I think technically he'd left, or maybe they'd announced that he was going to leave. The reason I'm constantly looking is not only the fact, obviously, transfer window, but just in case that coaching team is fleshed out any further. Because I think if I'm looking at it correctly, I think there's spaces for 1 or 2, potentially 3 to go in there. We'll talk about the coaches. It's probably a good point to do it. So Justin Cochrane, one of the certainly up there among the most highly rated young coaches around now. Say young, he's 43 years old, but that's young in manager. What's Thomas Frank, 51? We said Postecoglou was 59 in charge of Spurs, and he was. I think I might have said this maybe in the last video. I can't even remember what I said in the last video. I was away and looking very pink. Cochrane, he was being eyed up as the potential successor to Thomas Frank at Brentford. Very well thought of there, and it's a bit of a blow, I think, to them that he is headed off to Tottenham. He's kind of, I can see why Frank would have wanted to bring him with. He's a strong kind of trusted voice in his setup, and he's part of Thomas Tuchel's England setup as well. And I think that's meant or expected to continue in a part-time basis as well. And I think another important part of it all is that Justin Cochrane knows Tottenham inside out. He was at the academy as a coach for almost 10 years. I think it was just about 9 years or so, just under 10. He only left Spurs to go on to become England under-15s head coach, and he completed his UEFA Pro licence as well at the same time. So very, very well thought of coach, and likely to be another one, that goes on to be a manager at some point. But he has clearly decided on this occasion, no, at the moment, let's go on this adventure together with Thomas Frank, rather than kind of put himself into contention for the Brentford role. He's understood, from what I understand, he's good friends with Matt Wells from their time together as academy coaches. I would imagine he'd know Rob Birch pretty well, the goalkeeping coach. You might have noticed this week, it was announced, I think it was yesterday actually, it was finally announced that Nick Montgomery, Sergio Raimondo and Mile Jedinak had been released from the club after their contracts had come to a close. Oh, Tom Cleverley, Plymouth boss. Not Tottenham related anyway, but I just thought it was quite interesting. I'm interested to see what happens with Wells and Birch. Got no doubts that Montgomery and Raimundo and Jedinak will all head off into other clubs, and I'm sure they'll be snapped up quite quickly in this off season. But with Wells and Birch, they were employed by the club beforehand, so kind of on different contracts and a different basis, and they haven't been announced yet, presumably because Spurs and they are trying to work out what happens next. Wells, again, very well thought of, and there would be an interesting dynamic, certainly with him being very friendly with Justin Cochrane and presumably being able to fit into that coaching setup. However, there's the slight issue, I suppose, that we all would have in any walk of working life, that he was in a higher position beforehand. He was the number 2 to Postecoglou last season, so he would essentially be taking a step down to be part of this team, with Cochrane as the right-hand man to Thomas Frank. So that would be something he'd have to get over if he were to be a part of it. I'm not sure whether he will. We'll see. It's kind of at that stage, I think, where people are discussing what comes next for them. We've had Ryan Mason, obviously, has gone off to West Brom. Will he want to take anyone with him? I don't know. Matt Wells could well be looking to take that step himself now and be a manager, which he kind of always wanted to do. With Rob Birch, that goalkeeping coach position, he hasn't brought his keeper coach along with him from Brentford. His name begins with an S, a surname that's completely gone out of my head. But he hasn't done that at this point, Thomas Frank. So there is that role there, and the goalkeepers do respect and enjoy working with Rob Birch. So potentially, maybe we'll see him continue in that role, but that's yet to be kind of finalised, I suppose, and clarified as well. Keep hearing quite a lot of suggestions that potentially the under-18s coach, Stuart Lewis, you'll have heard me talk about, that he potentially could be involved in this new look staff as well, which would be, a very well-deserved step up if it does happen, because he's only 37 years old, been making a big name for himself with the within the club and outside of it as well, developing youngsters. A lot of youngsters have kind of come through into the first team setup. He's played a big role in their journey, and he's played good football with the under-18s as well. I think they've won 3 trophies in as many seasons. He's doing very, very well. I've seen some people kind of there should be no one from in the club, new people. And it's kind of this same logic, I think, that we sometimes, and myself included, we apply to transfers. It's like, we need a new exciting player rather than using anyone from within. And it's like, but, Justin Cochrane was within and is now a kind of a very, well-respected coach that has now come back to Spurs. There's nothing to say that these coaches within Spurs don't deserve their own chance. It's the way to do it. It's the same with, academy players coming through and everything like that. So, I hope he does get a chance, Stuart Lewis, because having watched his sides play, they play good football and he clearly develops players. So get him in there if there's an opportunity to do so. So there's them. Who else we got? Oh, Haslam, I was talking about as well. The performance head. He comes at a time when Spurs are looking to make big changes to their sports science staff, medical departments as well. And he worked for Brentford for almost 10 years across 2 spells. Involved with the Danish national side, including at the Euros as well. He is supposedly top draw. Cochrane, who, as I said, has worked at Spurs, England, United, Brentford. He says that Haslam is one of the best I've come across in terms of performance. So he should know. He's seen a lot of top performance type people. And look, with Spurs, we've been talking about it a lot. There's been a lot of problems with injuries, re-injuries, squad fitness, and he could be a key man to come in now and really kind of ensure that the physical performance out there is absolutely top notch, and we don't have a repeat of the things that happened last season as well. And it should be a good one. And apparently, he's quite involved on match days as kind of in constant communication with Thomas Frank. Sometimes quite often see him actually down there on the touchline talking to the fourth official as well. He kind of very much gets in on it. And I think it's interesting, his title is and also first team assistant coach. So he's going to kind of do a bit of everything by the looks of it. Then you got Newton as well, who is the analyst, who's kind of become this real key component as well of Frank's backroom staff. I watched, as I'm sure many of you have been doing, I've absolutely been poring over everything Thomas Frank related I can find in recent days, whether that is podcasts, whether that is videos, whether that is... I've got a book that I had to skip through most of it because it was about Brentford's history, but I'm now kind of on a part that is very much about Thomas Frank, so I'm kind of absorbing all of that. Articles galore, interviews galore. Same I have to do every time Spurs change a manager, which is frequently. But hey, gets me reading, expands my tiny brain. And one of the things I watched was Sky did this really good day in the life kind of thing, following Thomas Frank all day at Brentford. I recommend it. It's really good. And within that, you could see Newton, and he came across as this quite shy guy who kind of confident in himself, but quite shy in talking. And I imagine that's probably because the cameras were there, but he had this really close relationship with Thomas Frank, and he just knew, because Thomas Frank's big into video analysis, as many coaches are nowadays. He likes to use it not only with the players, being able to go straight up to them, say, look, as they're walking through the corridors of the training ground, look, this, by the way, is something I need you to do. I want you to do this. Can you do less of that, whatever? And he also does it with the coaches, with their daily briefings. So he's got this relationship with Newton now, where Newton knows exactly what Thomas Frank is going to want clipped up from matches, what he's going to need. He knows periods of play that saw the positives that that Frank would have wanted from it. Also knows periods of the play where it would have had negatives that he would want to improve. So they've kind of, over this 6 years or so they've worked together, they've just got this like synchronicity where, is that right? Synchronization? I don't know, I'm using a buzzword that's been created. But ultimately, yeah, he's able to come in and kind of be quite an important character for him behind the scenes. Sometimes you kind of don't think about these little bits and pieces, but as an innovative coach, this is all part of what he's going to be doing. He is a guy, Thomas Frank, that is going to give a lot of information to the players, and it's going to be fascinating to see kind of how much kind of they can handle, really. He certainly will go for a certain profile of player that is intelligent and can take on a lot of the instructions he gives them, because his teams are very tactically fluid and can change mid-game, and they've got to remember what they're meant to do. So, yeah, that's going to be a really interesting side of it as well. And, Andreas Georgian as well. Like I said, it was announced a few months back that he'd left Man United. So whether he was still technically contracted to them and they were saying he was going, I don't know. He was a set-piece coach when he worked with Thomas Frank, I think, at Brentford a couple of years back. Then he went to Arsenal and then United. I think, I could be wrong, but I think he was moved off of set pieces at United, became more of a general coach when Ruben Amorim came in and brought in his own people. And presumably that's maybe what led to him eventually heading off. I think he's Swedish. But certainly there's that relationship with Frank before. So, yeah, we're going to see how that all works. And look, everyone wanted a specialist kind of set-piece coach, someone that knows all that sort of stuff. Even though, there were bits and pieces that were better about Spurs' set-piece work, both defensively and offensively, under Nick Montgomery's work. But yeah, we shall see how that works. What else? We haven't had Thomas Frank's first interview yet for Spurs. Should be coming in the next couple of days. Again, whether it's anything to do with Friday the 13th, I don't know. Whether it's just to do with just logistics. I'm pretty sure that he was on holiday still at the start of this week. Whether he still is or not, I don't know. But I'm sure we'll get some kind of quotes of some sort in the next 24 to 48 hours or so. because otherwise people will think there's something horribly wrong. You know what happens with the internet? They always assume the worst, rather than just there not being any real rush to do it. Or, yeah, I guess, but people do need to hear from him. I think, being that it's one of his great strengths is communication, I think it would be a good thing, especially with some of the doubters that will be out there. Is it doubting Thomases? I forgot the expression now. He has, however, spoken in a way to Brentford, because he's written an open letter to his club that he was at for, it was almost 10 years in total, 6 years as the head coach. He wrote, "To everyone associated with the Brentford Football Club, the time has come for me to move on. But even as I leave, I know I have left a big piece of my heart at Brentford, not just at the football club, but with the community and, of course, the incredible and loyal supporters. I want to extend my profound gratitude to the club for giving me the chance to pursue my dreams, and for everyone involved who made the journey such a memorable one. For my family and I, it's been a privilege to be allowed to be part of such a special community. It's an experience and an adventure we will cherish for life, so thank you. Whatever we have achieved together, and our success is built on unity, spirit, courage and ambition at every level of the club and amongst the fans. Everybody has contributed, and every contribution has been invaluable. I'm not just leaving a football club, I'm saying goodbye to friends whose support through good and bad times I will carry with me always. I would like to say a special word of thanks to Matthew Benham. His trust and friendship have meant so much, and the fact that he gave me a chance in English football means that I will always owe him a debt of gratitude. Thank you, Matt." So while this is a goodbye, I hope the relationships I've built with everybody will be lasting ones, and of course we'll meet again in the wonderful world of football. Thank you, Thomas. Their goodbye to him pretty much summed up how much respect and gratitude they've got for his job. It was very nice, and he made a huge impact at Brentford, and I hope that they continue in a similar vein without him, and it's not one of those where you take out a big essential cog and it kind of all splutters and goes a bit wrong after that. But you would hope that it's a club that their aim is stability. You know, he was brought onto Dean Smith's staff as a successor, became the next manager. Technically, I know that was meant to happen with Cochrane, but there's a couple of other coaches on his staff that haven't as of yet come, who maybe they'll eye up to take over. I saw Kieran McKenna was another one that was eyed up as a potential one. I hope they're a good club. They're a well-run club, and they kind of try to do things in a different way, and I like that. They are an innovative club, so I hope they continue to succeed without him. So like I said, been doing my research, been doing my due diligence, as it were, as I'm about to talk about with Thomas Frank. And I've soaked up so much. So, I mean, it's like a nice little interview he did with Gary Lineker, who was making him dinner at the time. Jay Harris from The Athletic did a really good 4-part series, kind of, we'll call it a podcast. I think it's technically like an audio, I can't remember what it's called now. It's like an audio story or audio article, I can't remember. But it's really good. Over 4 parts. I found it as a podcast, and it kind of gave you nice insights into Brentford and some nice ones into Frank as well. And one that he did, which was very good as well in terms of what he brought to it, was the High Performance podcast. It's a good hour or so of Thomas Frank talking about kind of his time just as a coach and his background and kind of how he ticks. And it's good. And the reason I used the word due diligence earlier is because not only have I been trying to do that on Thomas Frank, but my goodness, he will have done that on Tottenham Hotspur. And the way it's run as well. When he was asked on the High Performance podcast, which was recorded earlier this season, he was asked about the prospect of potentially moving to a bigger club and the questions he would ask in doing so, because I think they'd had Graham Potter as a recent guest, and he'd found that whole experience at Chelsea was a massive learning curve for him in not asking the right questions. So he was asked about that, and he said, "If I ever should go to another club, I think it's difficult sometimes to be in a position to ask the right questions, but you definitely need to do due diligence yourself." Sir Alex Ferguson was saying, wasn't he, that you need to pick your chairman. Yeah, but that can be difficult because it's not that often that you've got the possibility to choose between 3 clubs. There's maybe 2 or 3 managers in the world that can do that. So for more normal managers like Graham and I, if that club comes along that we think is interesting enough, then it's maybe not an option for us to choose the chairman if we want that challenge. But I think this is a general thing I'd say now. It's not for me. I think for any football head coach or manager, of course, the ownership, the chairman is important. I think the club you're going into, can you achieve instant improvement? Is there low-hanging fruit, or is it difficult to raise the bar? And are the finances good? Can you get the players in and out you want to? I think that's the key. It's fascinating, all of that stuff, because obviously a lot of that has been among the gripes that we've heard former managers later come out and say. We've had Antonio Conte today has come out talking about various stuff about Spurs. I think he's got a book out, which I think is the one. I don't know if I mentioned it in the last video or not, that I saw. No, actually, because I think it came after. I was in an Italian supermarket in Sardinia. It would be an Italian supermarket in Sardinia. And his book was there. I kind of saw him staring out for me from the books in the supermarket. It was very like, oh, it took me back to all those press conferences. Essentially, the quotes, I've not got them written down here. When he was talking about Spurs, he was essentially saying that they massively celebrated fourth place, and he kind of told his coaches, I don't want to see you celebrating fourth place kind of thing. And to him, it was like, we celebrate trophies and we celebrate coming top and finishing first. So, yeah, essentially just Conte kind of having a dig at Spurs about where their priorities lie. And look, we've all spoken about it. It's just kind of opening that debate again. But yeah, I just thought it was quite interesting that the comments there from earlier in the season were very much the stuff that Thomas Frank would have to be well aware of when he's coming to Tottenham. And of course, he will be having to be well aware of the fact that they go through managers like, pair of underpants that need to be washed kind of thing. That's a weird analogy. I didn't know where I was going with it when I started the sentence. Got a little bit stuck, and for some reason went with underpants. I don't know why. They go through a lot of managers. Just keep it at that. But he has admitted, and this was not asking about Spurs in any way, but in this same podcast, he was asked about, does he fear getting the sack from any club kind of thing? Because he seems like a guy that's quite comfortable in his own skin. And he said, I've probably been working 60, 70 hours since I was 20 years old. Not with the ambition to be a Premier League head coach one day. That's a little bit of coincidence. Hopefully hard work, hopefully some skill. Hopefully good people help me along the way. And, just small aims, goals, and now I'm privileged to sit here. But I always try to get the balance, right, with family and friends. And I always knew that there was probably more important to me. That was probably more important to me. And of course, there are stages in your career. When I was at Bromby, I walked out myself after 3 years. I probably knew it was probably not that good to be sacked after 2 years. Of course, here I didn't want to be sacked, but now, no matter where I go in the future, or if I stay at Brentford, I'll never be afraid of getting sacked. Never, never, ever, ever. And I could just go home to be a teacher in Denmark. I know I'll miss the football a bit, don't get me wrong, my ego will be hurt and all that, but the biggest thing in life now is much more important, family and friends. Because if you're not aware, I think I mentioned it briefly in the previous video, he used to be a teacher. He kind of there was this real crunch, kind of crossroads in his life, Thomas Frank, when he was teaching while also coaching an under-17s team in the second division of Danish football. So he was kind of trying to combine it all and struggling to combine it all. So he had to make this choice of whether he kind of leapt into the football world. And bearing in mind, he wasn't a footballer of any note. He only played amateur football, never played professional football, which can be tougher to kind of get noticed. Or whether he stuck to the teaching route, which was maybe safer, could make more money for his family. He had a young family at that point. He went down the football route, and of course, the rest is history. He very quickly went through the levels in kind of club football in Denmark, but also into the Danish FA, where he was very highly regarded, and then Brøndby, and then Brentford. Yes, I think if I'd forgotten one in the middle there. So it's been an interesting route for him. He's a different character. Like I said before, he's going to be fun. It's going to be fun for us in the media. It's going to be someone that's going to, hopefully on the tour, sit down and have a drink with us, maybe, and have a chat that way, be a little bit more kind of, rather than and look, Postecoglou chats were really good on the pre-season tours, the two that we had with him, but they were more sat at a table and having a chat with him kind of in almost like an interview fashion rather than a chat. But it'd be interesting to see. He was asked about what his strengths and weaknesses are, to which he said, I think my biggest strength is I am positive, energetic and open. That's also the weakness, though, because it's often that the strength is the weakness. So I don't know if you can be too optimistic, but I think maybe I believe so much in the guys in the team. So say we go to Anfield, for example. I believe we can win there. And I get so, not frustrated, but down if we lose, even though I know the chance for us losing is big. So that's a downside to it. I mean, having energy. Also, I think the strength is that I want to do everything, which is good because that's given me ability or determination to achieve something. But I also learned that I can't do everything all the time. I need breaks and I need to rest. So yeah, look, for people that used to get upset at Postecoglou for not bouncing around and moving too much on the touchline, you're going to get someone in Thomas Frank who does do a lot of that. We had Antonio Conte, who was the other end of the scale, who was just absolutely ridiculous ball of energy that you thought he was going to have a heart attack at any point. What else? Oh, he was asked, Thomas Frank, his 3 non-negotiable behaviours for people around him. And he said, hard work, respect, and be on time. I can imagine somewhere Yves Bissouma went, no! To be fair to Yves, it was only that first time, I think, wasn't it, under Postecoglou, after he'd been telling him how much of a leader he could see him becoming, and then he was late the next day. Officially, that seems to be the only time, although I think we're taking Yves Bissouma's word for that. I think he said, I've never been late since. In his defence, apparently he had some car trouble that day. Yeah, you might remember that. Right back at the start of Postecoglou times. So yeah, that's kind of the stuff about Thomas Frank. He is going to be a really interesting character. I hope people give him a chance. You know, we've kind of got to put aside a lot of the Postecoglou stuff now. However disappointed some people are with it, however annoyed some people are with it. Ultimately now, it's not Thomas Frank's fault. There's nothing he can do about that. He's coming in and he, like I said, a good guy and a very good coach. So I hope he's given that bit of patience because he's needed it at previous clubs. You know, I think he maybe lost the first 8 at Brøndby. I think he lost 8 out of 10 in his first 10 games at Brentford. You know, he maybe is a bit of a slower starter because he's trying to get a new culture and mentality in there. So we know if that happens at Tottenham, it could be disastrous. So hopefully it's not quite as slow a process. You know, we await to see the fixtures next week and hopefully they're good ones for him. But, you know, there's other sides to what he's going to have to deal with, of course, because, you know, we saw last night, the other thing that happened was Cristian Romero throwing a Cristian Romero grenade into the room and closing the door in terms of his social media post. And, you know, I kind of, speaking earlier, like I said, about the due diligence that Thomas Frank is going to have to do, it will have been twofold. It would have been, first off, like I said, the running of the club, what it's like, why have many managers been sacked at Tottenham? Can he change that? Including, you know, they've just sacked someone that's just won their trophy, their first trophy in 17 years. But I think the second part of his analysis will very much be what's the squad like, what needs to be done, and what's happening with the best players. Every manager coming into a club wants to know what's happening with the key players. So we know that probably the 2 key people that there's some doubts over right now are Sonny and Romero. So, as I reported, people might have noticed in the week, and I reported that Sonny, from what I understand, is more open to leaving Spurs this summer than he has been in previous years, if there was something that suited all parties. Because he has finally achieved his goal at Tottenham, which was to win a trophy. You might remember, you know, he did a lot of interviews. I think it was originally with Korean media, and then he started to be asked about it by English journalists. He said the reason really, mainly, that he stayed at Spurs, despite getting offers in recent years, was because he wanted to win that trophy. He wanted to do that others had not. So he has actually achieved that now, of course. And, you know, he turns 33 next month. Had a frustrating season. You know, he's had the foot injury for some of it as well. But yet still, I think he'll be disappointed with having 7 goals in the Premier League. Of course, this is a former Golden Boot winner. But he still managed, as I keep saying, 23 goal involvements in 46 matches across all competitions, which is, it's still not too shabby, despite the fact that he will be the first to admit it's been a tough season for him. And of course, most importantly, he wrote his name into the history books. That's the big thing about this season for him. He's managed to achieve what so many of his predecessors couldn't. So, like I said, having achieved all of that at the club now, And really, he is a club legend. Of course he is. I know he joked that, you can't really call me a legend until I've won something. And then on that night he did. He said, okay, you can call me a legend now. And he is. He absolutely is. Um, you know, I think it'll be interesting to see what clubs are interested in him. We know teams in the Saudi Pro League are interested in him. I think there's where the money comes from. He's only got 12 months left in his contract because Spurs took up the option to extend it. Or to take up that option to extend it. So the money comes from the Saudi Pro League. They will know that with his huge popularity across Asia, that's major exposure for their competition, which, they're trying to bring the stars of the game to. Ronaldo there as well, Osimhen as well, Duran as well went for Villa, and I'm sure there's lots of other ones that have gone out of my head. But yeah, it's interesting because it came up the possibility, the thought of that last year, and he was very kind of ruled it out very quickly. He was very strong on it, Sonny. Obviously, it was before he'd managed to win that trophy as well. So, be interested to see what happens this summer. From what I understand, it's not as unrealistic as it was last summer. So, we'll see if anything develops there. From what I understand, there is definitely a little bit of interest in potentially MLS. You've got Messi there. You've got Hugo Lloris is there at LAFC, who's going to play in the Club World Cup. My wonder with MLS is whether the money is there to bring Sonny across. I think there would be a substantial fee to bring him across still. I don't know what it would be, but still with 12 months left, and what a, terrific world-class, he is one of the most well-known players in the game. He just is. I think Spurs still want decent money if they were going to kind of consider letting him go. So I don't know if that's there in MLS. I'm sure European clubs will be looking at him as well. But I think for Tottenham, they've got to balance the fact that, he's still got incredible ability. His contribution over the years, like I said, even in a bad season for him, 23 goal involvements, it's just mad. So you've got that. You've got his marketability as well. The club are heading off to Korea, Hong Kong first, then South Korea this summer. So you couldn't even surely countenance a potential sale before that. And then it kind of looks really mercenary, I suppose, if you do it after that as well. Because it looks like almost you were taking him out there to cash in on him, which is not a good look at all. But I guess you've got to weigh that against the fact that he is in his final 12 months of his deal, and he will be 33 next month. So he is no spring chicken, of course. Actually, on that, the whole marketing side of merchandise sort of stuff, from what I understand, I don't actually think Spurs make quite as much. Few people have told me this in kind of football finance circles, that maybe Spurs don't make as much money out of Son as we kind of thought they did from the Asian market. There is definitely, don't get me wrong, they make a lot from Son. He has been someone that they have milked, to put a finer point on it, as much as they can, of course, but I think mainly it's in the domestic market and maybe in Europe. But I think back home in Asia, from what I understand, he's a very clever lad, is Sonny. So I think he's kind of tied up a lot of the rights around him, and whether that's appearance, marketing, whatever you want to call it, merchandise and stuff. He's tied that a lot up himself. So he's the man that will get the money from that, which, as he should. I always kind of think in these scenarios, of course they should. It's Sonny's rights. But yeah. So I don't know if Spurs make as much as we think. Of course, they'll make tons still. In the domestic market, you've still got the shirt sales from everyone there that buys a Sonny shirt, which must be the most popular shirt by a mile at Spurs club shop. And these tours, like I said, are big money spinners, and I'm sure there's sponsorship deals that have with Sonny on board, like AIA as well, becomes a bigger thing as well. So I'm not saying they don't make a fair bit of money. I'm just saying I don't think maybe they make the huge, we could never sell this man amount. That's just what I've heard. It might not be the case, but it's what football financing types have been telling me. So yeah, and like I said, if there's not going to be a new short-term deal for him, because Spurs don't give out decent contracts to players in their 30s, they just don't. I think they would have been willing to do that with Harry Kane. I'm sure they would offer something pretty decent to Sonny, but it's whether he wants to stick around or whether he feels it's time now for a fresh challenge. But also, there is the Thomas Frank factor as well. He'll want to speak to Sonny. He'll want to tell him what his plans would be for him, whether he has them or not. You would imagine he does. I do feel like in his system, maybe there's a chance for Sonny to get back to where he was in terms of the goals he scores, because obviously in Postecoglou's system, wingers are more get to the byline, knock it across. And you always kind of felt like Johnson was the one who was in the box more so than Sonny for the crosses from the other side. Whereas maybe in Frank's system, it's so weird having a manager with a surname that also can be a first name. It sounds like I'm saying, "Oh, Frank, how are you doing?" Older people will just think of some others do have a money. Not one for the kids. That is very much for the older people like myself. Good fun though. What was I talking about? Yes, in the system he has two up front. Thomas Frank mostly in games. He likes to keep the opposition defence on their toes at all times by having two people high up the pitch most of the time. So if that was to be Sonny playing up front with Solanke or another or whatever, he would be getting a lot of the ball and a lot of the ball in good positions to score, which is a huge difference for him. So we'll see. We'll see what that does. I just wonder whether, people like writing Salah off and he came back stronger despite the fact that he's of a similar age. And, Sonny's got 173 goals and 101 assists in 454 games for Spurs. He is a machine. He really is. So this kind of idea that he's finished, I think, is just rubbish. I'd like to see him fully fit and without any of the kind of pain that he seems to have through various seasons with little problems like his foot one this time. And of course, there's Champions League football as well for Spurs next season. We mustn't forget that and what a draw that is. And having faced that heartbreak in 2019, he may want another crack at that as well. Much I think will depend on Spurs' stance, but also I think a lot over Sonny himself. Sonny has earned the right really to decide what comes next for him. I know it's not as simple as that in football, but I think he's earned that right myself. He was actually asked about his future on international duty. South Korea have qualified for the World Cup, which is fantastic, with a game to spare. And he was asked essentially about his future, and he was a little bit cryptic about it. It was certainly not a very clear and definitive, I'm going to be at Spurs next season. He said, for now, I think it's right to wait rather than say anything here since my contract remains. Many people, including reporters and fans, are very curious. Rather than thinking about the future, I think it's better to wait and see what happens in my current position. No matter where I am, I'm still a player who has always done my best and worked hard, so I think I should do well. I thought that was really interesting, the way that was put. I don't think Sonny's the type, to be fair, to really make his feelings publicly known, maybe for fear of disrespecting anyone. I think he's that kind of character. Talking of public feelings, Romero's a little bit different. Different in both the way he will talk, but also in his contract situation. He's got 2 years left rather than Sonny's one. And look, you'll have seen by now, surely, his post last night. He was very close to Postecoglou. They both had great mutual respect for each other. Anyone watching the parade, actually after the parade when they were on the stage, would have seen the very long kind of heartfelt embrace between the two of them while some of the celebrations were going on. And so everyone knew there was going to be a post from Romero about Postecoglou. We were waiting just to see when it was going to come along. Did any of you have in your thoughts 56 minutes after the Thomas Frank announcement? Personally, I didn't. I didn't expect that. I thought, we've had 6 days since Postecoglou was sacked. I thought maybe it would be on one of those days. There was a possibility maybe after he'd finished international duty, but then he put a load of posts up about Argentina. It was kind of a bit like, oh, okay, is this definitely going to happen? And then, yes, like I say, 56 minutes after he was announced. Like I said, I kind of described it as a social media grenade. It was very much that. So the post itself, in case you have managed to miss it, he said, Ange, thank you for these 2 incredible seasons. You're a fantastic coach, but above all, a great person who deserves the best. From day one, you paved the way despite the many obstacles that always existed and always will exist. Beyond everything, we won a trophy and went down in the history of this beautiful club, which is the only thing that matters. I wish you the best because you deserve the best, and thank you for everything. Look, it might be a complete and utter coincidence that this message came out when it did from Romero, his social media advisors, whoever wrote the incredibly perfect English that Romero's language skills are not going to have been capable of him providing. It just could have been a tweet or post that would just happen to be scheduled for 9:12 p.m. in the UK, 5:12 back in Argentina. Because, if you schedule something, you're definitely going to schedule it for 12 past the hour. There's plenty to dissect in that message, including, trophy being the only thing that matters was a key phrase. But of course, the one that most people have picked up is, from day one, you've paved the way despite the many obstacles that always existed and always will exist. You can take that any number of ways. And I think that's probably the smartest thing about this message from Romero or whoever wrote it with his say-so. Because it allows him to defend it if he gets into trouble with the club for anything. Because look, the obstacles that will always exist could be the critics of the club. It could be myself, the media. It could be the narrative that's been built around Spurs. It could even be the medical side at Tottenham. Don't forget, Romero very pointedly came out and thanked Argentina's medical staff, didn't they, when he was injured for helping him rather than Tottenham staff. It could, of course, also be aimed at the Tottenham hierarchy. He has history in that. I think it was December. He had a little bit of a pop in kind of trying to back up and support Postecoglou. He had a little kind of go at saying, the same people, are being blamed and maybe other people are responsible at the club. Something like that. I can't remember the exact wording. But, he's... actually, I've got the quote here. You have to realise that something is going wrong. Hopefully they realise it. The last few years, it's always the same. First the players, then the coaching staff changes, and it's always the same people responsible. Hopefully they realise who the true responsible ones are, and if we move forward, because it's a beautiful club that with the structure it has could easily be competing for the title every year. So he does have a history of kind of having a little go. And this one was another one of those, depending on which way you look at it. And look, Romero's made no secret of his desire to play in La Liga. We know that. Atletico Madrid interested in his services. I'd be interested to see whether they could get together the funds it would take to get him away from Tottenham this summer. Maybe, as some people have suggested, perhaps this was a way of trying to force a move. That's one way of looking at it. Whether that plus the availability issues he had last season combine to kind of push him towards the exit door, I don't know. Or it might cause Spurs to go the opposite way and dig in over a big fee that nobody's going to be able to pay. And look, on his day, as was evidence in the Europa League, he was player of the tournament in the Europa League. He can be an incredible player on his day. He is someone that is a top draw defender. He is a winner. This guy's won the World Cup, 2 Copa Americas, Finalissimo as well, and now Europa League as well. He is a guy that just wins stuff, and the other players look up to him. So, Spurs are going to have to kind of weigh up his importance to the club against the fear of losing him for nothing, I suppose, in 2 years' time, or even just a reduced fee next summer. If he's to stay, then Thomas Frank, there's going to be a relationship to build there, of course. He clearly was a Postecoglou man. And look, my other view on the post as well is, regardless of whatever you want to say what was in it, and whether it was intentional or not, the timing of it, it was disrespectful towards Thomas Frank to release that right then after he, within an hour of him being announced as a Tottenham boss, to then decide to release your statement about the former boss. I don't think it was the best thing respect-wise towards him. And look, he could be his manager next season. If he is to stick around, then, he had plenty of time to post it. I still believe that. And look, maybe that was the point of it. Maybe it was to create a difficult situation that needs sorting in his favour. But the irony, I think, behind it all is Thomas Frank is a player's coach. He is someone that, he could really enjoy working with Romero. Every player that works with Thomas Frank adores him. Although I was listening to another interview with him where he was very clear that if someone is difficult and doesn't want to be there, he'll get rid of them. He will make it clear that he wants them out if they don't hit all the marks that he wants them to meet in terms of their application and everything. So it might be that he has a chat with Romero and just like, no, you're all right. You're not for me. But it might go completely the other way. And if he gives Thomas Frank a chance, I'm sure Cristian Romero will quickly warm to him. I think he's that kind of character. Look, at the least, it will give Thomas Frank a little window into what life is like at Tottenham and the drama that often lurks behind each corner. Leaping from the frying pan into the fire from Brentford to Tottenham. It really is. Interestingly, the first player, I think only one thus far, that has been able to comment on Thomas Frank's appointment because he was asked, is probably one you might not expect, and it's Mikey Moore. Mikey Moore, currently the European Under-19 Championships. Simon Peach from Press Association grabbed him and asked him a couple of questions. About Postecoglou and Thomas Frank. And he said, with Ange, I'm thankful to him. He gave me an opportunity to go and show people what I could do. Now I'm just excited to get back and hopefully go and impress the new manager. Try and show what I can do, really. I started away at Brentford, where obviously he was in charge, and I've played against his team before. I've heard that he's a good man and he's a good manager. One of the boys here, with the under-19s, works under him and says good things about him. So I'm just excited to get going under him, really. He speaks so maturely for a 17-year-old. It's absolutely incredible. When I look back on the season, when I go back to last pre-season, I didn't ever expect to be in the position I was halfway through the season because he played 19 times, Mikey, last season. But obviously it wasn't all great. It didn't all go to plan. I think there were certain parts in the season where I've not struggled, but I've had down moments. But when I look back on it, it's been a massive learning year for me, and it's obviously come to an end now, almost, and we came out successful. It's a season I will always look back on and be proud of. Because obviously he scored his first goal for the club as well in that against Elfsborg and played 5 times, I think, in the Europa League on the way to them winning it. So he very much deserves his winner's medal. And he was asked about that night in Spain in Bilbao, and he said it was a top experience. Some of the best times in my life on that Wednesday night. Hopefully going on to win another medal and another trophy with these boys here, the England Under-19s, would be a brilliant feeling and experience for everyone. There's some top players. I think we can go on and hopefully win the tournament. It's been a good little build-up. Excited to get into the games now. So, yeah, he's got that. Keep an eye on him. There's another player. I think it's Paris that's gone out of my head. His surname. Reese. It's gone out of my head. I'm very... do you know what? I'm going to have to look. Reese Russell Denny, there it is. I don't know where I got Paris from. Reese. So keep an eye on them. Archie Gray started last night at right back for England under 21s in their European Championship. So they're the ones to kind of keep an eye on over the coming weeks. And actually Audebert and Matisse Tel as well. And then the French under 21s too. Yeah, what else we got? Oh, there was a little thing just before I came on that I thought was quite interesting. The Telegraph had a bit of an exclusive that Tottenham have taken a High Court legal action against Sir Jim Ratcliffe's Ineos. Sir Jim Ratcliffe, obviously the owner or majority share holder at Manchester United. It's a long story short and lots of technical stuff. It's to do with a sponsorship that they've a multi-million pound 5-year deal in December 2022 to promote the Ineos Grenadier car as the club's official partner. And talks have been ongoing since at least February over Ineos withdrawing 2 years before the expiry of the deal, and those negotiations appear to have failed to find an agreement, according to the article. And apparently Tottenham lodged a claim on June the 12th, less than a month after they beat Man U in the Europa League final. In a statement, Ineos told Telegraph Sport it has exercised a contractual right to terminate its partnership with Tottenham. Ineos Automotive has been a partner of Tottenham since 2022, taking on a partnership agreement that Ineos Group had in place with the club since 2020. Like any business, we have to be diligent in how we operate and where we invest marketing budgets. It's completely normal for partnerships to be reviewed on a regular basis, and we've decided the partnership wasn't working out for us. We have the right to terminate the partnership. I think Tottenham declined to comment, but yeah. Not the most thrilling thing in the world, but just an interesting little thing, bearing in mind the Man United connections there. What else have we had? Oh, there's another friendly. Spurs will be playing Luton Town in a pre-season game at Kenilworth Road on July the 26th, 3 p.m. kickoff. That's another kind of opportunity for Thomas Frank, as well as the games against Arsenal, Newcastle and Bayern Munich, ahead of that Super Cup against PSG. It's mad that his first competitive game is going to be a potential chance to win a trophy. But there you go. I imagine we'll see one or two more friendlies getting announced in there as well. It doesn't seem like a completely full schedule to me. I would imagine probably another domestic friendly. I don't know whether there's room now to have a home game. I don't think there is because of the Bayern game and the Super Cup. Which normally there is, unless they did an early one, which would be unlikely, you would think, with a squad that's not quite ready yet. But yeah, so the friendlies are starting to build up. What else? I guess transfers now can start kicking in, hopefully. Now we know who the new head coach is and what they want. That can start pushing forward. I would expect 1 million links to Brentford players, of course. Bryan Mbeumo is the current kind of figure of choice, isn't he? And understandably so. He's a terrific player. And his name, has been involved in discussion between the two clubs when they've been talking about Thomas Frank as well. And from what I understand, he's one of a number of multiple kind of attacking options Spurs are looking at. Obviously, he's got a great relationship with Thomas Frank from their time together at Brentford and what he did with him. From what I understand, talk of a formal bid has been played down at this stage. That's not to say it's very always wary of saying that because sometimes you get aggregators go, no bid has been made, and it's not technically the way it is. A formal bid is a bit different. You can have discussions face to face about, would you accept this? Would I do this? And kind of thing. And that's a different thing. Some people might class that as a bid, but it's not technically an official lodged bid, but it can be one that has been discussed between parties. So, from what I understand, a formal bid has kind of been played down at this stage, but he's certainly the player that Spurs and Thomas Frank would no doubt love to have at Tottenham Hotspur. There is, of course, the Manchester United problem. That's the one that exists there. Spurs can offer Thomas Frank and also Champions League football to Mbeumo, but United, we know will offer higher wages, and of course there is the scale and the history of Man United as well. So, there certainly seems to be a lot of people reporting out there that his first choice is United, and will continue to be so. We'll see. Spurs sometimes they come in with these situations where they feel like another team maybe has the edge on them, and there are the occasions when maybe they'll offer a bigger overall package, which might seem unusual. A lot of people say Spurs don't go for a bigger bid, but sometimes it might be kind of backloaded towards future payments, but they might try and go for a bigger bid in the hope that the selling club or potential selling club will agree to a deal with them, and the other team maybe will decide not to go to that level. Doesn't always work, but it must work on occasions. But yeah, we'll see. And Mbeumo's terrific. He would be fantastic at Tottenham. Would he score 20 goals this season from the right-hand side? He would be terrific. I know. What did he get? Was it 17 goals? I think Brendan Johnson, I think it's 20 in total, isn't it, for club and country? But yeah, Mbeumo's superb. But yeah, let's see. I do fear the United angle in it all. But yeah, we'll see how the coming days shake up. And like I said, always say with the transfer market as it is, who knows? It could be something. As soon as I hit upload on this video, there might be some more news on that in either sense. But certainly, he's one of a number of players Spurs are looking at as attacking options. Johan Wissel will be another one for Spurs as well, because he's very good. He and Mbeumo both got 20 goals each. last season. Antoine Semenyo as well. He'll be another one at Bournemouth. He is another one at Bournemouth. Don't forget, obviously, he played with Solanke last season as well, so there's an understanding there. I would imagine he'd probably be the most expensive of the trio, you would think. It certainly seems to be because he's got such a long-term contract, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Let me double check. I think I've got him here. Semenyo. Maybe not. I'll look it up as I'm talking. Well, not really talking and concentrating. Contract. I feel like that was what it was, though. 2029. He's still got 4 years left, so I think that's kind of a key point there as well. They're kind of some of the attacking options, and there will be more that come out of the woodwork as well. This is it now. Now we're at that stage where we'll start to know what Thomas Frank wants. That's been the problem before. It's maybe been players at the club have looked at and potentially identified, but now we'll get to know more about what Thomas Frank wants. And I was trying to think about other ones at Brentford if we're kind of looking down that line, and he will want a number 6. He'll want a proper defined number 6 in his system. That's what he needs. And look, you've got Bergvall and Gray to really develop there. But it's almost a shame. I think I mentioned it in the last video. Christian Norgard, I think, would have been perfect for Frank to bring with him, but he signed a new contract in March. I think it was only a short term. I think it was a 2-year one, but I know, again, in my many listening to various things, I almost called him Postecoglou. I really don't hope. I really hope I don't call him Ange in a presser like I called Ange Nuno. It's so random what goes through your head when you're just about to ask a question. But with Thomas Frank, he said in the podcast, he just absolutely went on and on about Norgard and how much he loves him as a player, but also as a leader, as someone that other players listen to. And he just knows tactically where he's meant to be, and he'll tell other players, he'll talk to other players about what they could do a little bit better. But he gets that respect from them and they listen to him. So it's almost a shame there. I wonder whether Spurs will still try and have a cheeky go at getting him or not. But definitely someone I think is quite an underrated player in the Premier League as well. I do wonder whether Pierre-Emile Højbjerg, whether he would have stuck around had he not had this obligation to go to Marseille, whether Thomas Frank would have liked to have kind of included him. Of course, you got Mikkel Damsgaard as well, very creative player. I just wonder whether with the likes of Maddison and Kulusevski there and Spurs really wanting to sign Eberechi Eze this summer if they can, whether that's whether he ends up just being in a bit of a crowded area, I don't know. Who else you got? I mean, there's loads there. There's Sharda, there's Nathan Collins, there's Yarmouk as well. Yarmouk, isn't it? I think that's how you pronounce it. And he also had really good success with Frank, with Keane Lewis Potter, who's kind of turned him into a left back. So there's loads of ways, but look, as always, when I had to kind of say stuff like that, we're looking at things from Spurs' perspective. I see this so much on Twitter. Everyone has this kind of way about them where, like, it's easy. Whack 70 million down on the table, get him, bing bang bosh, fantastic, done. And then we all kind of ignore the club that the player is at and where they have any intention of selling whatsoever or need to sell. We all fall into a trap. I do it exactly myself as well. And look, Brentford may well say, you've taken our manager, his potential successor, you can do one. You're not going to sign anyone else. I think with Mbeumo, there appears to be this kind of feeling that he's kind of earned his chance to go to a bigger level, a bit like Thomas Frank. So maybe that's an option. With Visa, I think he's got 12 months left, but they've got an option to extend that. So he's not going to be big money. And again, there is an aspect of Brentford that, they do buy low to sell high. That is part of their kind of project to keep kind of sustaining what they're doing. But I still think they'd have every right to say to Spurs, no, do one. You're not having any more of kind of what's brought our success. And also, look, there's going to be an aspect of some Tottenham fans that are going to be going, well, why are we buying from a club like Brentford? Which is obviously a thing. Why are you trying to sign players from a team that look to finish in mid-table when you want to be finishing higher? But we know it doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that at all. You can take any player out of the system that maybe is a team that is used to finishing at a certain level. And out of that, I mean, Cunha has just gone to Man United. You're not going to seriously say that, he's a player at Wolves level. He will go there and he'll do very well. We're going to... Transfer silly season is going to kick in like mad now. We're going to see that. Paratici still involved as consultant. We're going to see the billions of Italian links as well. And players that used to be somehow connected to him at some clubs. Matisse Tell, I mentioned him earlier. The Bayern sporting director Max Eberl said that Spurs are still negotiating over Matisse Tell. Obviously, you'll remember Spurs signed him on loan in January. A reported €50 million option to buy, 42.5 million roughly that is. Look, he fitted in well. He's become a popular member of the squad. He's had some good performances. He's had some not so good performances. We kind of always forget that he's a guy that was signed as a teenager. He's 20 now, but he's been thrown into the most toughest physical league there is going and expected to perform in a team where often he was playing early on as the lone striker because Richarlison and Solanke were injured. He had a tough time of it. But the fact that he had 20 appearances and only scored 3 goals and got 1 assist, it doesn't merit a €50 million price tag. So Spurs are always going to go back in and try and negotiate that down. Maybe even try and get a loan with another option on there. I don't know. He's actually successful this season in terms of trophies, isn't he? I was just thinking about it. He's won Europa League with Spurs, but he also presumably gets a Bundesliga medal as well because he played half the season there and they went on to win the title there. He's playing, like I said, for France at the Under-21 Championships. Not in Vincent Kompany's Club World Cup squad. I think technically his loan deal at Spurs still will go to the end of June, I think. It's normally the way it works. That's what my football manager brain thinks anyway. The game, not me being a football manager. Eberl, the sporting director at Bayern, said Matisse was at Tottenham for 6 months. He wanted to play in the Under-21 European Championships with France, and we allowed him to. We're talking to Tottenham. That's no secret. We'll see how that pans out. We will. We'll see what happens with him. I know some people have decided he's rubbish and all of this sort of malarkey. I think he's a player with a lot of potential there. Like I said, he's a guy that came into a club and was thrown into action and had to very quickly try to learn what not only the system was about, but the league and the life and the culture and all of that. And I think if they could get him for another season on loan, I think would be the ideal kind of scenario. But I even think for like £20-25 million mark, I think he's someone who's going to surprise a lot of people if he were to play next season. And someone that, look, again, we talk about Sonny and playing as someone that could be a bit of a support striker. That role in Frank's system might suit Tell really well as well. So, yeah, let's see what happens with him. I keep saying let's see what happens because I'm fascinated to see what happens this summer. How much Spurs spend this summer is going to be a huge thing because I do think they really need to back the Thomas Frank appointment because they're going to look incredibly daft if it fails. You've replaced someone that's won your first trophy in 17 years, regardless of the league stuff. That's going to be viewed in a certain way if Thomas Frank is not to be a success. So I think they have to put the money in, and of course that could depend on potential investment coming in, whether it's from outside or from ENIC. Because I just feel like we're at this crossroads once again with Daniel Levy, the hierarchy, ENIC, whatever you want to call it, where they kind of need to decide what Tottenham is meant to be. Every 2 years on the dot, they're changing the manager at the moment. You could have penned in on your calendar for the summer of 2025, 2 years ago, expect a major change in the dugout and another new direction because it's happened this year. It happened 2 years before that. It happened 2 years before that. And yes, 2 years before that. It just is a constant thing. And history in that sense does not bode well for Thomas Frank. He's going to be looking to kind of erase that potential appointment on people's calendars for 2027. But the history shows that in all, the club have sacked, Daniel Levy sacked 13 managers during his tenure. And with the arrival of Thomas Frank, so there will have been 19 different men leading Spurs from the dugout, including caretaker managers during 24 years. 19 different people in 24 years. It's a remarkable number. It's an incredible number. And it's not just different people, but different styles have been brought, different systems, different characters and needs. The reset button has been hammered so many times. Other clubs might have this set, defined style of play, but, it's all set within a kind of overall stability. Even if they're making changes, overall the stability is there. And it kind of makes the changes more seamless. But it's not really the case at Spurs. Like I said, over a quarter of a century kind of at the helm of Levy and Enoch, it's difficult to know what their Tottenham is, as it's constantly changing. It's just a natural byproduct of that. You might think it's meant to be the swashbuckling style of old, the Bill Nicholson era, the Arthur O push and run, is that what it's meant to be? The Keith Birkinshaw years with Hoddle and Ardiles and Villa, even Venables, in the early 90s with Gaza and Lineker and many others as well. And you kind of think that, and then you think, yeah, but they appointed Mourinho and Conte and Nuno. It's kind of going for a very different brand of football, and then we get a statement that says, we want to get back to exciting brand of Tottenham football, and it's like, ugh. And Levy himself has admitted he's made mistakes over managers like Conte and Mourinho as well. And he said 2023, just 2 years ago, we did it twice, and look, you have to learn from your mistakes. They're great managers, but maybe not for this club. For what we want to play in a certain way. And if that means it has to take a little bit longer to win, maybe it's the right thing for us. That's why bringing Ange in was, from my point of view, the right decision. It didn't actually take that long for them to win. That's the irony. He brought in these win-now managers to get a trophy, and then Postecoglou managed it. All within that 2-year time frame as well. But yeah, look, he decided eventually he wasn't the right man for the job. Even if he declared just a couple of months into Postecoglou's reign that he had brought our Tottenham back. We've got our Tottenham back, he famously said. And look, keep going back to it, but the crux now is for Spurs, is for Levy, is for the board, is for whoever is in charge to finally decide what Tottenham is meant to be. What are they going to be? He's always said, Daniel Levy, that he is just purely the custodian of this great football club. Without a doubt, he's improved it off the pitch. The stadium, the training complex, everything. But on it, we're still none the wiser of what Tottenham Hotspur is meant to be in the modern era. Are they a trophy-winning side? Albeit the cup side, maybe they were before Levy's arrival. Because in the current guys, look, they're not going to be consistent title challenges as they are, because while a fair chunk is invested, maybe not in the right players, it's still nothing compared to when you look at what the sums that the big top six spend. I mean, Liverpool have just signed someone for more than £100 million, haven't they, in Wirtz? The only time Spurs have kind of gone close was with Poch in those 2 seasons when Leicester and Chelsea won, and they are the aberrations more than the norm. Or rather than the cup side, is the aim of Tottenham Hotspur to simply exist by striving for the top 4 each season, like Conte kind of was hinting at with his comments this week? Is it a club built around the prospect of trying to bring in Champions League football and the finance of it that then maybe keeps it successful as a club or a business, whatever you want to say? Or maybe that money is to aim for higher as a football club as well, not just the business side of it. I think the problem with that suggestion is that if that's been the plan for the last 2.5 decades or so, they've only succeeded in finishing in the top 4 on 6 occasions. Technically 7, but Harry Redknapp's 4th place finish didn't count, annoyingly, in 2012 because of Chelsea winning the Champions League. Before, yes, they changed the rule. Maybe that was balanced up by the fact that Postecoglou managed to get them Champions League football despite them not being good in the Premier League. Maybe that's our balance that we got all these years on. And yes, Redknapp and Postecoglou were both sacked after both of those achievements. And look, I've said it kind of in reports this week. Privately, Postecoglou is understood, from what people have told me, to have felt early on during his tenure at Tottenham that despite his best efforts to change things, he wasn't going to be able to do so. And look, and when I mean change, I mean kind of big kind of change behind the scenes rather than just little bits and pieces. But he kept pushing and he managed to make his mark in a way that so few before him were able to. But I think we're at this point now where Spurs need major investment. They do. I know they've been looking for it the last 14, 15 months or so. All eyes will be on whether it does kind of arrive. And like I said, whether it comes from outside source or whether it comes from ENIC putting more money in. But they're at this stage now where it's a big roll of the dice with Thomas Frank coming in. And of course, there's a big changing board as well. There's new people on that board, and what that means for the long term, what it means for Levy, what it means with Vinay Venkatesham coming in as well, who's obviously comes with a very kind of highly regarded ways. And yeah, I guess for Levy, it'll kind of very much he'll want to kind of, I suppose, define what his legacy at Tottenham is. Is it to be this training ground and complex? Is it to be the 2 trophies that he's now won? Because, we all kind of thought that was going to be what he was kind of desperately craving. But Spurs just haven't really allowed the euphoria of that night in Bilbao to kind of manifest for very long, have they? And like I said, it's a roll of the dice financially as well, because we're talking about finance, and Spurs, I think they're going to pay approaching maybe 18 to 20 million, something around it, maybe 18 million in total for sacking Postecoglou, paying off his Europa League winning bonus, for bringing in Thomas Frank, bringing in his staff as well. I think that's kind of the figures that people are kind of anticipating it being in all. And of course, there's then the transfer cost of fitting the squad in a different way to a different manager again. It's a big financial outlay on a head coach who doesn't come with the Conte or Mourinho kind of star name to him as well, and it will take him some time to win over some section of the support. Like I said, for his part, I really don't want to make this in any way negative against Thomas Frank, because he is a very good coach, very clever coach, an innovative coach, a great communicator. I'm really genuinely putting everything, my feelings about how Postecoglou was treated aside, I'm really quite intrigued and excited to see what Thomas Frank can do. I think he will say all the right things for the fans when we eventually hear from him as the Spurs boss. But also I think he'll say the right things to the players, which is a key thing as well. Because look, a lot of them were disappointed with Postecoglou heading off. He will be a safe pair of hands, but I think he will need and want to be more than that. Because you've got to make that change worthwhile. It really is. He's going to be very good, I think, at bringing on this group of young players at Spurs right now. And perhaps that's the hope, Spurs. Maybe that's another aspect to it as well. Maybe the plan is to create this group of young, talented players who will kind of graduate with honours at the same time, and become, you look back at Man U and winning it kind of with a group of kids, but we know that they supplemented that with some big players as well. But, could they all graduate together under, Thomas Frank, a former teacher? Let's go with that narrative. But I guess the Champions League is a very unforgiving classroom, to be in that next season without some top quality experience around them is going to be very difficult for them. And Thomas Frank is very much a head coach. He's not a manager. He is someone that will want to be on those training pitches, want to be kind of working with the players very close. He still wants the final say on transfers. I was listening to an interview with him where he made that very clear, that if he doesn't want a player, he will not have a player. So that's going to be that dynamic again. Nothing will be forced upon him. I think the relationship with Johan Lang is going to be key. I think I mentioned this before. He worked with him briefly at Lyngby. And they both come from this data-driven world. They exist within that. They like it. And it's something that Spurs have switched to in recent years. Parachi, maybe exists less within that world, but he's going to be in and around things still as a consultant, likely remaining there, you'd think, until there's some clarity on what's going to happen with this trial that's going on in Italy with him. And look, maybe that gives Langer a chance to kind of forge his own long-term future at Spurs, just give him that little bit more kind of... what's that little bit there? Tottenham rejected Rosario Central's loan offer for Alejo Velis. Deal currently on standby. Spurs prefer to sell the player. I think we spoke before about Rosario Central wanting to have him back. yeah, I think this is a key chance for Langer to kind of put himself suddenly back into the winner, because there's some doubts about if Paratici comes back. Naturally, there will be. But this is his chance to say, look, I know Thomas Frank. I know what makes him tick. I know what players will work for him. Let me provide them. And if he does that and they succeed, then he solidifies his own position suddenly. But yeah, and I guess much of what we see and whether he gets the right tools will be dictated by what Tottenham can finance. Because it's all very well Thomas Frank kind of sewing miracles out of the cloth in a way that he was given at Brentford, but that was to exist at a certain level. And he did it very well, don't get me wrong. He punched above his weight massively. But for Spurs, there are expectations. There are kind of high hopes for what they want to do, and even more pressure put on by the sacking of Postecoglou, who won a trophy. That's going to naturally be there now as well, and all eyes are going to be on what comes next. And like I said, it's just such a big moment, it feels like, for me, for Spurs. They're a club that have constantly changed, even if the final product hasn't really altered. They've had the biggest changes probably of recent history, haven't they? With both men's and women's head coaches gone. Robert Villaham's gone from the women's team as well. He took them to a women's FA Cup final. Just had a nightmare of a season really with them this year. And so they've been sacked within days of each other, Postecoglou and Villaham. We've had major changes at boardroom level. Talk of this potential investment coming in as well. This needs to be the summer, doesn't it, really? When Daniel Levy, I guess, and you look bored, whatever it's going to kind of look like, just decide, like I said, exactly what Tottenham Hotspur is and stick to it. Give it everything they've got. Otherwise, we're going to have to be marking our calendars for probably June 2027, which I really hope is not the case for Thomas Frank. I really hope it isn't. He's a good man. An excellent coach, and like others before him, just needs stability. Just please, some Spurs stability. He got stability at Brentford. Like I said, lost the first 8 out of his first 10 games there, but went on over 6 years to create something really special. Spurs need to stick to something and see whether someone can create something special at Tottenham, because there's so much potential at Tottenham Hotspur. I think that's what probably frustrates us the most. There is so much potential within this club to be something amazing, but we want them to be more than just existing. We want them to dare and to do. It's there in the motto. So I really hope it happens with Thomas Frank. Transfer stuff's going to hot up now. Of course it is. Now it can. So I will trying to do as many of these as I possibly can without wanting to jinx deals and them suddenly changing, as has always been the case when you try and do these things as quickly as you can. And yeah, I think we should, like I say, get something from Thomas Frank in a Spurs sense in the next day or so. Then I'd imagine maybe we'll have a press conference next week. We'll see. That would be great if we could. And then, of course, the friendlies to come. And then I shall be heading out on the tour to Hong Kong and Korea, where I'll be hoping to get a good sit down with him there and speak to all the players about stuff. And hopefully we'll have some new faces, because that was quite a successful thing that Spurs did in Postecoglou's first year, was they got the likes of Maddison and Vicario over the line quite quickly and got them on that tour. I think it's such a crucial time for bedding in players, especially in a year where there's no international tournament, really. You can get going with your philosophy and your ideas. Talking of philosophy, that's another interesting thing with Thomas Frank, which will mark him out a bit differently, I think, to others. We've often had all these managers come in with very clear ideas about how they want to play and what their philosophy is going to be. Whereas with Thomas Frank, he's constantly evolving and adapting. And you look at his Brentford team over when they're in the Championship, in their first year in the Premier League, how they were. It's changed so much. In the Championship, they were a very possession-hungry kind of team. First year in the Premier League became more counter-attacking to kind of just make sure they could stay up, really, be a little bit more solid. This season, I feel like they've been kind of more exciting to watch. I think it's only 3 or 4 teams have scored more than them, perhaps, maybe 3. So they definitely have got goals in them. Like I said, Mbeumo and Visa both 20 goals each. So he will adapt as well to Tottenham. And it's really fascinating to see this, is that, we're going from someone who had a very set idea of how to play to someone who will kind of morph into what is required. So that's going to be fascinating as well. Yeah, I think I've used fascinating just enough times. Time to head off because this is a very long video and my wife's going to be very annoyed because I'm sure dinner is awaiting me. But hopefully we've covered loads of different stuff. Like I say, everything could be out of date by the time it finally uploads because it's going to take a while at this length as well. But I shall be back probably early next week unless something major happens over the weekend, and we'll discuss more things Tottenham Hotspur. So yeah, as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves. I shall catch you later. Goodbye.